Hi everyone, this is Jerry here. So I'm the course leader for BIM's PG Cert in Learning and Teaching. Now that's our in-house creative education course. What I want to do in this video is I want to give you an overview and a bit of an insight into the different routes into teaching that you might take. Now, commonly this is quite a difficult sector to get into, the teaching profession, and one that's honestly a little bit confusing to look at the different qualifications and requirements. So I want to help break some of that down for you and get you some useful information to kind of give you a starter point so that you can work out whether teaching's right for you and you're interested in pursuing it, and what kind of areas of teaching you might like and what kind of qualifications will be attached to those. So before we get into it, I think there's kind of three useful starter points that you can use when deciding what kind of teaching you might like to go into. And you're welcome at this point to pause after each question and quickly jot down for yourselves some answers, some kind of initial thoughts, because all of that will be really useful for you when we come to looking at the different teaching routes, just to reflect back on and to think about which areas might resonate more or less with. So firstly, when considering teaching, how do you want to work? You know, what are you looking to get out of the work that you do? Quite a lot of people look to teaching as, I suppose, like another string to your bow, or something to add to your professional portfolio, right? So you might be liking the flexibility of teaching as another skill set to get some additional income. Equally, we have a lot of people come on RPG Cert that are actually looking for the security of a stable job and of another profession, another career that they can get their teeth into kind of full time. So, you know, what kind of work do you want to be doing? You know, how do you want to be working when you're doing it? Secondly, where do you want to work? You know, are there particular areas in the UK, you know, particular cities, places that you want to live? Are you looking to travel? Are you looking to get some experience outside of the UK? And equally, if you know you're interested in teaching, say at an institution, looking at schools, looking at colleges, are there any particular places that are more kind of or less interesting for you? And then finally, what do you want to teach? And who do you want to teach it to? So quite commonly, we might just assume that because you've been coming to BIM, you will want to teach music. And you know, quite often that's the case. But there might be other subjects, other disciplines that you've got expertise in that you want to teach, you want to share that with the world. And similarly, you know, do you want to teach novices? Do you want to teach more experienced, more creative people? And are there any age ranges that you'd like to teach? You know, quite often people have very strong views about teaching children and whether it's something they would like to do or not. So just have a think about what and who you're kind of mainly pulled towards and I suppose pushed away from as well. Lovely. So you've got some of that to think about, right? Now, to take you through the rest of the video, I just want to lead you through a selection of different areas of the profession that you might end up in, and some of the requirements, the strengths and weaknesses of each of them. So firstly, private tuition is something that you might be considering. You know, it's very, very flexible, can fit around music careers, other things like this. So whether you want to teach music one-to-one, you know, you want to become a teacher, peripatetic teacher, that just means you travel about between different institutions, different people's homes, and kind of sell yourself independently as a tutor of a particular subject. Secondly, you might already be aware of foreign language teaching qualifications like TEFL and other things like that. Now, if you want to travel, this is a fantastic route to go down because anywhere in the world, people are after skilled English teachers to teach English as a foreign language there. So again, this is another kind of flexible portfolio route you might take. Thirdly, schools. You know, quite obviously we've all been through this kind of area of the system already, both looking at primary school and secondary school, and whether you want a job as a teacher in either one of those. Now, I'll get onto this in a bit, but schools typically have the highest or the most stringent entry requirements for teachers. So they're both looking for you to have a teacher training qualification. They're looking for you to be a qualified teacher. And those are two slightly different things, and I'll clarify them later. And they'll want you to have a degree or at least a qualification above your students in the particular subject that you want to teach as well. So it's quite rigorous to get into school teaching. Then of course there's also further education. So this is your sixth form, your colleges, you're looking at A-level qualifications, BTEC qualifications, sort of the adolescent to adult learning. And they've got some slightly different requirements around that sector of the profession as well. And lastly, higher education. So you might be looking to teach at university, you know, come back to teach at BIM or somewhere else like that. Now, typically this isn't people's first step in their teaching career, but it might be somewhere that you want to end up. So I think that's useful to consider as well. So let's talk a little bit about private tuition then. Now, this is typically your most flexible, kind of most open route into teaching, and typically most portfolio musicians, at least at some point in their career, will do little bits of teaching. Now, typically this is very much off your own back. You find that most private tutors are self-employed, whether that's doing, you know, one-to-one music lessons, doing group tuition, and what this requires is for you to focus on your strengths and really sell yourself kind of as a musician, as a professional. So it requires a lot of your own initiative. A lot of upfront marketing might be required in order to generate students, but there are some other kind of supportive agencies, online services that you might join or sign up to. But really it's kind of off your own back to go and find students, develop curricula that you'll teach them, and generate your own kind of skills, right? So often people tag up with, say, the Rock School grade system, they do music teaching or something like that, because it just helps you with a little bit of structure early on. You can also actually get private tuition work through schools or in schools. As I said, peripatetic teachers generally bounce between different schools in a particular area, offering one-to-one teaching. And the best way to apply for that is actually through local councils, through council music services, because they have links with all of the different secondary and primary schools, and they kind of have a roster of different musicians that they then kind of divvy out work to. So you've generally got two routes: either go fully self-employed, or you're kind of mainly self-employed, but also having links with schools and agencies and other things like that. Now, private tuition doesn't actually require any specific teacher training, right? So it's all about your own expertise as a player, as a professional, and then it's kind of down to you to work out how you're going to teach and how you're going to support your students best. And that can be quite challenging because, you know, off the bat, the main feedback that you'll get if your teaching isn't up to par is that your students just won't come back to you, right? So it can be quite an unsupportive environment to develop your skills of being a teacher, but it's certainly one that you can just jump straight into. So some helpful starter points if you want to get into private teaching. There's the Brighton Hove Music Service. Again, they have a roster of different music tutors that they have on hand, so they can get you work in schools, and I think they've got about 4 vacancy points throughout the year. Similarly, there's the East Sussex Music Service that does a very similar thing, and if you're interested in generating your own client base. You know, if you're looking to just get your own students, you can market, say, attached to a particular practice studio, rehearsal studio, that can be a good route. Then the Musicians Union has got a really good guide to setting up and building your own business as a private tutor. So next up, we've got teaching English as a foreign language, or TEFL teaching. So this is a really useful skill set to have if you want to travel. So it's typically very flexible and has a lot of international kind of credit, right? So you can pretty much land in any country you like and find some kind of work teaching English as a foreign language. Although it's getting more competitive now, there are lots of different institutions, lots of different schools out, and in the UK as well, as well as abroad, that will offer English to foreign language learners, right? Do be aware that it's less well paid than other forms of classroom teaching, especially in the UK. And TEFL teachers tend to be worked quite hard, right? So there tends to be quite high hours, quite low pay, but it's something that's very flexible. And when you're looking around, you know, there are lots of different private institutions out there that will hire you as a TEFL teacher. And similarly, there are lots of different qualifications that will train you up in this. So TEFL teaching is quite a prescriptive form of classroom teaching. So you can go and get your qualification and they'll teach you about engaging the room and bouncing questions around. All of the teaching you do in TEFL will be in English. So all of your students, it won't be their first language, but they'll be conducting, you know, everything in the classroom will have to be in English, right? So you don't need to worry about learning another language. So out of the box, you've got TEFL, are the kind of biggest, most well-known bundle of qualifications for this professional route. You've also got ELT, English language teaching, and you've got CELTA as well, which is Cambridge English Language Teaching Association. So have a look into those different routes. There are lots of different options in terms of the amount that you pay for, say, a TEFL qualification. There are kind of different bands that take different amounts of time. Some of the qualifications you can do just online. Some will have you come in, do a bit of practice teaching on the day in workshops. And it's really up to you in terms of how much, you know, developmental time you want before you're thrown into a classroom environment. So lastly, let's talk about the big scary world of teaching at an institution. Right, so whether this is schools, colleges, universities, these are all the more formal, usually more full-time and secure roles that you might get as a teacher. And typically you're going to have to spend a bit more time investing in your training, both training to be a teacher and potentially other professional or academic experience in the subject as well. So let's break down really what you kind of need in order to teach at any of these different levels. So in schools, what you can need is you can need this thing called qualified teacher status, which is a professional badge of recognition that says, you know, you are a professional teacher. So to teach in a school, you're going to need to get a teacher training qualification. Usually that will be a PGCE, or postgraduate certificate in education, and then that will lead to you gaining this thing called qualified teacher status, right? So it's an academic qualification and then a professional badge of recognition, right? And you'll also need to have your subject qualification, say in music, say in science, whatever, at least one level above what you're going to be teaching. So say if you wanted to teach GCSE music, well, you would need at least an A level or preferably an undergraduate degree in that subject, right? Now the caveat here, unless, right, this will come up quite a lot in this bit, unfortunately, that is unless you're looking at teaching in a private or a free school, right? So in those two cases, you don't actually need to be qualified as a teacher. So they'll be looking at your other academic and professional experience. they generally do like you to be trained as a teacher as well. It's certainly useful for you, but legally, that's not actually required of that particular part of the sector, right? So looking at further education, colleges, it's actually again up to each institution whether they require qualified teacher status or not. Again, it's a massive advantage, both in schools and colleges. Qualified teachers actually get paid more than unqualified teachers. So looking at getting your status as qualified teacher is something, in either case, you'll absolutely want to be aiming for. But in colleges, technically, it's not a legal requirement across the board. Again, they'll be looking for your active involvement in the industry and academic subjects at least one level higher than what you're going to be teaching. Now, again, it goes slightly the other way with universities, or I suppose slightly further down that same road, where you don't need a teacher training qualification at all. Usually universities provide that in-house. At BIM, the PG Cert that we provide is both open to you guys as teacher training qualification, but it's also the same course that we offer to current BIM staff and other groups, right? So universities typically get people that are experts in their field and then train them up to be teachers. So, you know, looking at teaching in university probably wouldn't be your first step out of your degree at BIM, but it's somewhere that you might want to end up. So if you're looking to teach at university, look to finish your PhD, you know, get your postgraduate doctorate in the subject. Or if you look at somewhere like BIM, somewhere that's slightly more practical, they'll be looking for you to be active in the industry that you want to teach. So, you know, looking at BIM, we know that across the board, people are active members of the music industry, whether that's as players or in music business or whatever. Now, we've already touched on a couple of the acronyms that get used within teacher training. Now, unfortunately, the landscape of qualifications in the teaching sector is quite vast and quite confusing. So I'll try and break it down as easily as I can. So firstly, we've got a PGCE, right? So this is a postgraduate certificate in education. So it's a master's level qualification. And these are the courses that teach you the specific skills of being, say, a secondary music educator or a primary teacher with an English specialty. So they're looking at specific age ranges, specific subjects, and then they'll teach you, both on placement and at a university, all of the skills that you need to go and do that teaching really successfully. So next up with teacher training courses, we have an SCITT, right? This is the School-Centred Initial Teacher Training Programs. So these are things like Teach First and other routes that will essentially throw you straight into a school, straight into an institution, and help you kind of unpack it while being on the job. So they generally pay a little bit when you're often doing it. There's less time spent studying at university, but it is very pressured when you're in the school because you haven't really been taught how to do it first. You're in there in the middle of it, learning on the job, right? Suits some people, difficult for other people. Now, both of those routes, both of those will lead you to have QTS, and QTS is this thing called Qualified Teacher Status. So if you want to teach in primary or secondary, you'll be looking at either of those two qualifications. If you're looking at further education or universities, then you'd probably be better suited to doing a PG Cert. And a PG Cert is the qualification that we offer at BIM. There are lots of different quals out there, but generally PG Certs take a kind of broader approach to training as a teacher. So they'll train you in general teaching and learning theory. You'll be put on placement still, generally, but it's looking at post-compulsory, usually, generally more creative, generally a bit more holistic as a programme. Now, although a PG Cert is focused usually towards further and higher education, you can actually go back and teach in schools with a PG cert if you want. And that's done through the confusingly titled QTLS, right, which isn't QTS, Qualified Teacher Status, but it's the equivalent. So a few years ago, these used to be completely separate streams of teacher education. And then the government recognised that actually they had very well-trained teachers kind of in either camp that couldn't teach across schools and post-compulsory. So they've added in QTLS as a way of training as a post-compulsory teacher, and then getting a separate follow-on professional badge of recognition that then allows you to go into schools, right? So that's the whole landscape, and there are a few more routes than this, but I think these are the main players. So as I've said, there are kind of two kinds of professional accreditation. So you've got your academic course, your PGCE, your PG Cert, that trains you as a teacher. And then after that, you've got to be recognised as a professional teacher. And that status will get you paid a little bit more, right? So we've already talked about QTS, Qualified Teacher Status. Now this is gained automatically at the end of a PGCE course. So say if you went to Sussex and trained as a primary teacher, you'd take your year at Sussex and then you'd become what they call an NQT, a newly qualified teacher, and then you spend a year or a couple of years teaching, and at the end of that you gain your QTS and you get your status and you're paid more. Brilliant. Now if you go the other route, if you take a PG Cert, so if you come to BIMM, then you will take your academic qualification, you're trained to be a teacher, and then optionally, up to you, right, off your own back, you can then go to, I think it's now done through the Education and Training Foundation. They offer this thing called QTLS, which is Qualified Teacher Learning and Skills. And again, this is another professional badge that says you're a professional qualified teacher at this level. For colleges, for schools, you'll be paid a little bit more as well. And both of these now allow you to teach in schools and in further education as well. Right, lovely. So for any kind of postgraduate teaching qualification, so looking at PG Cert, looking at PGCE, these are all taken after your undergraduate, so hence postgraduate teaching qualifications. There are certain things that you'll need before you apply to any of these different courses. So first up is you will need to have your undergraduate degree. Now, typically they'll either ask for a 2-2 grade in your undergrad. Some courses, including ours at BIMM, ask for a 2-1. It just depends on the particular challenges and the particular setup of that course. You'll also need to have level 2 qualifications in literacy and numeracy, right? And also, if you want to teach in primary, you'll need a science qualification as well. So at very least, by the end of your year studying, training to be a teacher, you'll need to have the equivalent of a level 2 in English, maths, and maybe science as well. So essentially that's a C or above at GCSE level, but there'll be international equivalencies as well, or say a level 2 functional skills will do just as fine. So if you're looking to teach in schools, you'll generally want to take a PGCE course. Now, Sussex have already given some fantastic guidance on their provision for PGCEs and others out there in the sector. Brighton University also offer one as well. But first up, I'll just advise you to go straight to the .gov website for Get Into Teaching. This is a fantastic resource looking at all different routes, different qualifications. And then they've got some really great links about exploring your options, leads you through different subjects, different training options, and funding. And then they also give you the basic options for either university-based PGCEs or school-based SCITTs, or Teach First, or all of those different things. So again, there's just great guidance online. Go look into this as a route if you're interested. I would say that PGCE courses tend to be full-time, tend to be very intensive as a training route, and largely in school as well. So although you'll be training at university, you'll be in placement a lot of the time as well. And you can be paid a grant, you can be paid a salary sometimes as well for that route. So there are a few different things to consider when funding for PGCE. So there are some tax-free bursaries and scholarships available for some courses. So basically these are heavily dependent, unfortunately, on what subject you're looking to teach and also what previous qualifications you have, right? And I don't think it takes too much time to guess what kind of subjects, what kinds of grades you need to get the most funding. So if you're a maths graduate and you got a first, you can get up to £32,000 absolutely free, just gifted to you, to become a maths teacher. Quite astounding. But unfortunately, art and music, including us at BIM, there's a maximum of £9,000. Right? Seriously, there's a incredulous difference there between the two subjects. It does change year to year, so make sure that you check this up with the Gov website. But certainly there'll be different fundings available, right? And again, there's the link if you're interested. Now, I should say as well, a PGCE will be funded by Now, I should say as well, a PGCE will be fully funded by Now, I should say as well, the PGCE and I should say as well, the PGCE route will be fully funded by the Student Loans Company. So again, you can get a loan and you can get different bursaries, which are kind of just free money, really, gifted to you if you want to train to be a school teacher, taking a PGCE. It's a very good route for teaching in schools in that way. So that's it. I hope this video has been helpful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to record another video to follow up specifically regarding BIM's PG Cert. So that's my course that I think is really well suited to further education, higher education, and also as a training route if you want to do it privately, if you want to teach music, you want to maybe teach workshops, any kind of creative arts subjects, but you want to be trained up and supported really well, I think our PG Cert's a fantastic offering for that. So I'm going to give you a separate video on some of that. But if you've got any questions around the other routes into teaching or PGCEs or just general advice, please do drop me an email here at this email address. I'll happily get back to you. And in any case, I just want to wish you the absolute best of luck with your life, your career, following BIM. So take care. Thanks a lot.